ultimately, the whole point of this conversation is that I've been reflecting on what got us to this point where we feel like the sense of community has been eroded to a point where we feel safer with machines than we feel with other human beings. But have we cultivated enough safe spaces for people to know that when I am going through something and I cannot readily reach my therapist, if you have a therapist, but I can still go to my community? Welcome to Mindful Mondays, your weekly dose of mental health conversations. And today's a little bit different. Obviously, it's a solo episode, but I came across an episode. So I listen to the Daily a lot, and I've been very fascinated with AI and trying to think about how AI will basically impact mental health in the long run. I say this as someone who uses AI, and I'm currently studying generative AI, and it's interesting because we learn about the back end of how these systems actually work. And it's a bunch of zeros and ones. And you can train the model, and it speaks about like how you can teach it how to give you the output that you want, right? And you can teach the machine how to respond in the ways that you want. So when I was listening to this podcast, it was interesting because I think like 2 months ago, I was going through a lot. And there's times where you feel like you can't really have a conversation with someone about it. And by that, I mean, we almost live in a society where being vulnerable is such a scary feeling because you don't know what people will do with the information that you give. And when you are in a position where you have a lot to lose, it's very difficult to express what it is that you're feeling, to express something that you're going through, because we fear judgment. We fear having our boundaries crossed. We fear telling that one friend in confidence who tells their other friend in confidence. So we end up being so closed off because we are scared. So with me specifically, with what I was going through, I turned to ChatGPT. I started like having a conversation with it, almost like letting it become my therapist, because honestly, the reason I did that was because it felt safer than a lot of people. And there's different ways of like thinking about safety. But for example, I couldn't talk to my mom about it because I'm like, oh, I don't want to stress her out. I couldn't talk to my friends about it because, oh, they've got their own thing going on. But I realized that I wouldn't say become reliant on it, but I had become reliant on this machine basically validating my experience. And at first I didn't think there was any issue with it. And when I was listening to this podcast, so it's called Trapped by ChatGPT or Trapped in ChatGPT, and it basically speaks about a young boy who was going through a lot, who had been struggling with his mental health, and he turned to ChatGPT, and ultimately, he died by suicide. And it was an interesting conversation because it was jarring to listen to, because what happened is he bypassed all the safeguards that are put up by these machines, and then the machine started basically responding in the ways that it wanted, or he wanted it to respond. And then another example they made was of a guy who was convinced that he had discovered something incredible, that he was super smart, like almost like a genius. And only when he started consulting like a different AI tool and different people, that's when he realized that, oh my God, it was just responding in the way that I wanted to. But ultimately, the whole point of this conversation is that I've been reflecting on what got us to this point where we feel like the sense of community has been eroded to a point where we feel safer with machines than we feel with other human beings. And when we think about mental health in its entirety, how does AI fit into the, I don't want to say the eroding, mental health of so many people, because mental health is still, I still believe that it is a silent epidemic or pandemic when you think about it, because a lot of people still can't speak about what it is that they go through, because I don't want to say we haven't cultivated enough safe spaces, but have we cultivated enough safe spaces for people to know that when I am going through something and I cannot readily reach my therapist, if you have a therapist, but I can still go to my community, and with everything literally at the, I don't want to say the tip of your tongue, but like in your hand, like with social media, like, are we escaping from the actual realities of our lives? And if we are using ChatGPT as a friend, because in that specific case with that young boy, ChatGPT became his best friend. And I would joke around, honestly, like 2 months ago about like, oh yeah, ChatGPT feels like it's a friend, and to no fault of anyone's, but I just honestly felt safer with the machine. But where do we draw the boundaries? You know, like where do we draw the boundaries with how much we use it and for what we use it for? And with the increasingly over-reliance of our everyday and like even the small tasks, you know, where we just ask ChatGPT to write an email for us. You give it a prompt, you give it the whole scenario, and the way it responds sometimes it feels seemingly human. But what has happened to our society that makes us feel like it's better to trust a machine than it is to trust another human being? Why is it that machines feel like more of a safe space than actual human beings? And as you reflect, as you listen to this, how are you using these machines, and what would make you feel safer within your own community, if there is a sense of community still left out there? Because, and it's not just ChatGPT, but like the whole tech era and social media era, which is AI is really important, and the digital era is something that needs to be embraced for sure. But where are the boundaries? And if we're starting to use ChatGPT as a friend, or any other AI tool, Claude, Gemini, or any other tool, where do we draw the boundary in terms of what we use it for? And where therapy, mental health, or mental illnesses are concerned, is that something we should be using it for? And for someone who's, I guess I had a good experience, but listening to that episode made me feel like I don't ever want to have such a conversation with a machine again. But if this is where the world is going, how do we embrace it safely? How do we still have a sense of community within our actual reality? Not that AI is not reality, but it's not. You're trusting a machine with your emotions. You're trusting a machine with your mental health. And I did that. And it wasn't anything until I realized the dark side of it, you know? And in starting this conversation, I'm going to invite a few people to have a conversation about it in the near future. What would make you feel safe within your own community so that you don't turn to ChatGPT for mental health support? And if it is the case, and that's where it is going, what safeguarding measures do we need as a society to make sure that we're safeguarding our humanity and not losing, you know, our ability to socialize, our ability to communicate with other human beings about what it is that we may be going through? And within our own respective spaces, how do we build our ability to socialize again and feel safe in that? And how do we build spaces or communities where whatever I may be telling you, I don't feel like I'll be so judged that I'd rather turn to a machine? And I've just been reflecting on that. This is a completely different way of how I approach solo episodes, but I was trying to think of like what I wanted to speak about today and like what I may be going through. And I realized, in as much as we should be embracing the digital era, to what end? And where mental health is concerned, should we be using machines as our trusted confidants more than we actually trust human beings? And what has eroded between 5 years from now, 5 years ago to now, that has made this okay, that has made us feel like we can trust a machine with our emotions? And I may be the only one, but I know that I'm not. I know a lot of people, I've seen tweets, I've seen threads, I've seen opinion pieces about the over reliance on machines. So where is the end all and be all, and how do we get off these machines to get to a place where you use them in a productive way, but while still safeguarding our humanity? So I just want to start this conversation to have us reflect about our relationship with it, and have you, the listeners and viewers at home, share your experiences with it, so we can build a series where we actually have this conversation, because it's unavoidable at this point. And again, as I was thinking about what I wanted to speak about today, it's been at the forefront of my mind that I thought it would be amiss to not have this conversation. So yeah, share your experiences, and how do we safeguard ourselves, our emotions, our minds, and I guess our humanity in an increasingly digital era where boundaries are being crossed and blurred between what is okay and how much of it we are allowing into a space, and how it impacts our mental health. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. I know this was a pretty short episode, but I just wanted to start that conversation as we are now preparing for season 2. How has AI impacted your life and your mental health? Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.